Hello, welcome to this revision video on the History Boys focusing on the character of Hector. This video will take you through the character, focusing on some of his key sort of themes and quotations, the things that he represents. And the first part of this video is going to do that by looking at some pictures. And so in front of you, what you have is a picture of Hector from the stage version, and he's in his sort of uniform. And it is an eccentric uniform, and his uniform reveals much about the character. Bennett chooses this uniform on purpose. So what's he wearing? He's wearing an aviator's jacket. He will be sort of wearing the gloves of a motorcyclist, but they're referred to as les gants. He is wearing a scarf. He is wearing a helmet. Just in case it wasn't clear that he is a teacher who is different to most other teachers in this school setting, well, the uniform, such as it is, gives it away. The leather biker's jacket. This is a man who is doing his best to appear different from others. So just in case we weren't sure that he is an eccentric character, an anomalous character in a school setting, well, the uniform, the costume, gives it away. Hector's name is also significant. In the course of the text, we will learn that Hector is both his name and his nickname. Mrs. Lintott tells us this piece of information. His name is significant because of its allusion to the sort of Greek story of Troy, where Hector was our hero figure. And in this story, Hector is our hero. Or is he? Because there are many things that Hector does in particular that really make it quite difficult for us to feel completely sympathetic towards him. These pictures here have been chosen because they enable us to see some of the key plot points, but also to see Hector in his different states, if you like. And I will seek to go through these in something resembling chronological order. In the top two pictures, we see Hector in the early stages of the text. All of these images are taken from the film version. But in the early stages of the text, Hector is established by Alan Bennett as an eccentric figure. He wears a bow tie, but through the things that he does in his classrooms. The top left picture here demonstrates Hector in sort of full flow. We can see the environment that is his classroom. There's a piano, which the boys make huge amounts of use of. Scripps plays the piano, Posner sings. These are unusual things to happen in lessons which are not music lessons. And these are all happening in general studies lessons. And Hector's view is that general studies is an opportunity to tell the boys things for their own sake, simply to tell them because he thinks that it's very much worth knowing. He thinks that it's valuable for these boys to play music. He thinks that it's valuable for the boys to learn and recite films from the 1950s. He thinks that the arts in and of themselves are significant. And that's why in the background of this picture, you have a collage of posters, really, of the things that Hector deems to be significant for study. And throughout the course of the text, Bennett makes numerous references to them, whether it's the poetry of A.E. Housman, the works of Shakespeare, Othello. He says, "Steep me down in gulfs of liquid fire." I hope I've got that right. Or whether it's the fact that the boys are singing things like bewitched, bothered and bewildered. He values the arts. He perceives it as knowledge for its own sake. Now, Alan Bennett is a playwright and an actor, and as such we can, I think, safely assume that he too would value the arts. Alan Bennett too seems to believe in knowledge for its own sake. In the top right-hand picture, we see arguably the most extreme form of this belief in knowledge for its own sake. The picture depicts the moment when the headmaster walks in to the classroom in the midst of the French scene. Dakin here in the background, he's not wearing any trousers. Again, not the kind of thing that happens in most classrooms. Probably the kind of thing that if it does happen, leads to a disciplinary or probably the member of staff being fired. In modern day language, it's quite the safeguarding issue. However, Hector is able to manipulate this moment with the boys' help, because they are complicit. They are in on this act. They are part of the pact, one of the phrases that Hector uses in the text. What do the boys do? Well, they go along with it. And so when Hector tells them that it's not a brothel, but in fact it is the boys are reenacting a scene from World War I. Actar chips in that it's Ypres in World War I, a sort of Belgian town, Belgian city. And the boys go along with it. As I say, they are complicit. They are in on it, is what that means. That French scene is arguably the most memorable of the text. What we have is enormous amounts of visual humour. It's farce, F-A-R-C-E. It's comical. It's a set piece, really. It's kind of a little sketch in the midst of an overall, a wider text. And so we see here how Hector, he doesn't just believe in knowledge for its own sake, but he practices what he preaches too. And he allows the boys to shape the direction of the lessons. At the beginning of the text, we see how the boys are in agreement with this. They value this freedom. But when push comes to shove and when the pressure is on, they all want to do well in their exams, and Hector is inclined to shun exams. If I work in a clockwise direction, in the bottom right, we see a scene right at the end of Act 1. Hector is sitting down, book in front of him, because he values literature, and he is talking to Posner. It's a tuition session with Posner where they focus on the poetry of Thomas Hardy, specifically the poem Drummer Hodge. This is arguably the most poignant moment in the whole of the text, maybe even more poignant than the end of the text where we learn of Hector's death. But it's poignant because in this moment, Hector and Posner bond over their sense of being not quite in the swim, is the expression that they use. There's a sense that Hector and Posner are outsiders, and the poetry of Thomas Hardy, Drummer Hodge, is used to embody that. In the middle of the screen, I've chosen this picture predominantly because this is the boys on their trip, on their tour, but Hector is centre stage. He is at the heart of the play. He doesn't have the most lines, actually. And he probably doesn't even have the best lines in the play, but he is the centre of the play. I think Alan Bennett constructs him to be the centre of the play. Yes, there are morally grey areas that, to some degree, get sidestepped. To some degree, they're really not criticised strongly enough. But Hector is at the centre of the play, and there he is at the centre of the boys, with his teachers either side of him, each of whom sort of symbolise slightly different teaching philosophies. In the bottom left, we see a picture which is hinting towards the tragedy of the text. Up until this point, the text has arguably been more comedy than anything else. But as we approach the end of the text, Hector dies. And we are told that Hector dies on his motorcycle, giving Mr. Irwin a lift. The suggestion is that Mr. Irwin leaned the wrong way. I think the exact expression is, trust Irwin to lean the wrong way. And so that picture there on the bottom left is chosen almost exclusively to highlight the end of the text, the tragic death of the hero, or is he, Hector? This video is not going to be too much longer, and so we're going to finish it by looking at some of the key quotations of Hector's, and they're pretty much in chronological order. "Well done, my children. Well done," he says. This is his first line in the text. Alan Bennett chooses this first line, and our expectations are cultivated right from the beginning. He speaks French. The audience is left to consider why. But his introduction is one where he arrives on the stage with the spotlight on him and the boys remove his clothing. It is as if he is a knight of the realm. He is our hero, and the boys are his subjects. They are in awe of him at this particular moment. So first lines of characters and last lines of characters are always particularly interesting and helpful. The second quotation, "Remember, boys, festoon your answers with gobbets and you won't go far wrong," is a criticism of Irwin's teaching philosophy. Irwin's philosophy being that exams are a game that you have to play, and the way to play the game effectively is to insert into your work the knowledge that you have, but interesting knowledge, not dull stuff, nothing boring. And so with this quotation, Hector is sarcastically critiquing the philosophy of Irwin. The third quotation, Timms asks why they study poetry. He says that he doesn't get it. Hector explains, well, poetry is an antidote. It's like a vaccine, to use a very current word. An antidote. Grief, happiness. You're feeling sad, grief. Poetry will provide happiness. Even when you're dying. We're making your deathbeds here, boys, he says. This is a quotation chosen to demonstrate Hector's value of literature. He's an English teacher, first and foremost. One who went to Sheffield, not Oxbridge. Not Oxford or Cambridge, Oxbridge. And consequently, he doesn't value exams for their own sake. He just thinks that poetry and writing is in and of itself splendid. The fourth quotation is the only one chosen where it's from the words of another character. And I tried to avoid that because otherwise there'd just be too many. But this one I felt was just useful. And these are the words of Mrs. Lintott. She says to Irwin about Hector, forgive him. He's trying to be the kind of teacher pupils will remember. I think there's just a sort of truth in that. One might question, well, why? Why does he feel the need to be remembered? In the scene alluded to previously, where Hector speaks to Posner about the poem Drummer Hodge, Hector uses a series of compound adjectives where the phrase "un" is placed before the verb to explain how compound adjectives are a frequent feature of Thomas Hardy's poetry. Earlier in the text, Mrs. Lintott says to Hector that he loves compound adjectives and uses almost the crudest one of the lot to refer to Dakin as being struck by the female form. This quotation is so important because unkissed, unrejoicing, unconfessed, unembraced, each of those words applies to both Hector and to Posner. Nobody has kissed them. They have little joy in their lives. Hector has not confessed what he does to the students on his motorbike. He feels unloved. They are both not quite in the swim. When Hector is then relieved of his duties, when he is told by the headmaster that he is to be retired early, he breaks down in front of the boys. What made me piss my life away in this God-forsaken place? There's nothing left. There's nothing of me left. Go away. Class dismissed. Go. Maybe we're meant to pity Hector here. Experience, however, suggests that everybody always laughs. Everybody laughs at this scene. Everybody lacks sympathy for Hector. He starts crying like a baby. No, no. So everyone has a good old chuckle at it. But it's an important line because, well, Hector has spent his life in the school because he values knowledge for its own sake. Arguably, his being asked to retire is another rejection in a life of rejection. The fact that he might deserve it, he can't quite see that. Following that decision, Hector is forced to share the class with Mr. Irwin. In that lesson, they discuss the Holocaust. Unsurprisingly, Hector is in opposition to Irwin. Irwin suggests, along with some of the boys, that the Holocaust can be taught. Hector disagrees. Hector takes issue with something Lockwood says, etc., etc. His line is, etc. is what the Nazis would have said, the dead reduced to a mere verbal abbreviation. Lines like this help to convey Hector's innate humanity. He cares for others. He values other people. But significantly, he argues it on a point of language, because language and literature is what he values. The next quotation is chosen almost exclusively to demonstrate further how Hector's philosophy is starkly contrasting to Irwin's philosophy. May I make a suggestion? Why can they all not just tell the truth? This is in the scene for when the boys are having their mock interviews. So it used to be a reasonably commonplace thing to do that before going to university. Schools would conduct mock interviews for absolutely everybody. It's less common because there are fewer interviews done these days for university places. Hector wants boys to just be themselves. Irwin again is implying that, I don't know, that maybe the truth's not quite what you want. Maybe lying is what's significant. So we're hopefully gathering together here a series of evidence to demonstrate that, well, Hector has his values, but the key is that they are in opposition. They are contrasting to the values that Bennett creates Irwin to have. Later in the text, Irwin asks Hector and tells him really that he is tempted to touch the boys. Hector warns him, don't do it. But he says, to see it as an inoculation, a bit odd this, I have to say. It's always the contentious thing to teach. But if you were to touch the boys, if you were to find yourself attracted to them, Hector tells Irwin, see it as an inoculation. It's a vaccine again. It's painful for a while, but providing immunity for however long it takes. With an occasional booster, it's pretty scuzzy. Scuzzy is not a formal word, is it? But I think as an audience, we are encouraged to have mixed feelings to Hector as a consequence of his values. We are encouraged to believe in the importance of knowledge for its own sake, that exams are not the reason for the education system to exist. But he is not truly heroic. However, Alan Bennett reinforces that Hector is at the center of the play because it is Hector, despite being dead, technically, chronologically, who gets the last line of the text. Pass the parcel. That's sometimes all you can do. Take it, feel it, and pass it on. Not for me, not for you, but for someone, somewhere, one day. Pass it on, boys. That's the game I wanted you to learn. Pass it on. A really helpful quotation in terms of just characterizing and summing up what Hector believes in. Pass it on. Knowledge for its own sake, whether it's Othello, A.E. Houseman, George Formby, When I'm Cleaning Windows, Bewitched, Bothered and Bewildered, as Posner sings, the Pet Shop Boys, as Rudge later sort of sings at the end of the text. Doesn't matter what it is, but all knowledge is precious, whether or not it serves the slightest human use. Please use this video to have a go at answering this particular question. How does Bennett present the character of Hector? Use the quotations and use the guidance suggested in the pictures to push you in the right direction too. That's it for this video. Hope it's been useful. More of them to follow. Thanks very much. Bye-bye.